How's that going for you? You know, last night I had a rough night, okay? I was just dreaming this, that, and the other thing. They were not God dreams. They were not nightmares. They weren't even bad dreams. They were just nonsense dreams. I don't even know how else to put it. None of them had anything to do with anything else. I remember even waking up during the night going, this is just ridiculous. Like, this is silly. There's nothing powerful here. There's nothing earth-shattering. There's nothing frightening. There's like nothing. Honestly, they were nonsense dreams. So I don't know if that's a term or not, but we're going to coin it right now if it's not. And I'm just going to say we can have God dreams, we can have bad dreams, and we can also have nonsense dreams. And so last night for me was full of nonsense dreams. But today I really want to talk about dreaming with God. You know, it's so important that we learn to dream with God and that we learn to dream at different levels. I remember sitting during my quiet time, this was some time ago, and my life was about to change. And as I sat there pondering with God, he invited me into a season of dreaming with him. And honestly, I had thought that I had been dreaming with God. But, you know, years before he had placed something on my heart, which had been growing and growing. And the result was that I needed to take a huge risk in order to really pursue that dream. But what I didn't understand in this moment at the time I'm talking about is he was inviting me into a different style of dreaming. Now, scriptural basis for this. A lot of you guys know this, you know, it is scriptural to ask for the Lord to give us dreams. Okay, so some people dream all the time like they just need a microphone next to their bed so they can just recite the dreams because they just go all night. Me, I'm not a big dreamer. And so I've learned to pay attention when I have a dream from God. There are times, there are seasons, there are dreams that stand out for me that I know because I know are from God. And then there's other dreams like last night where they're just nonsense dreams. Okay, I don't know how else to put it. They were just nonsense dreams. And so, but anyways, when we talk about scriptural, the scriptural foundation or to ask the Lord for dreams, you know, it says in the last days, God says, you know, he says he's going to pour out his spirit upon all people. And you know what? You're all people. I'm all people. So you could just say right now, I'm all people, which means I can dream, which means God will pour out dreams. Okay. So scripture makes it very clear that in the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all people. Sons and daughters will prophesy. Young men will see visions. Old men will dream dreams. And so people have been dreaming for centuries. And yet this sounds different. It's like, you know, God's had people dreaming since the creation, since he decided we needed sleep. And even, you know what, honestly, not all dreams are at night. Think of daydreaming. Think of just kind of losing yourself in the presence of God. They're all forms of dreaming. So that's been going on for centuries. And yet right here, he's saying, in the last days, I will pour out my spirit upon all people, that he's going to release the prophetic and he's going to release the dreams. In other words, there's a whole nother level. And so I wonder how many different ways that plays out in our lives and through our lives. So in the book of Genesis, we meet this great young man, you know, name of Joseph. He's 17 years old when we step into his life, into this encounter. And, you know, the one thing before we dive into his story, I want to just set up right here is that we need to know who we share dreams with, when we share dreams with them, who we don't share dreams with. We have to understand that some dreams might be for now, and others are for a later time and need time to just grow and marinate. In other words, God's just planting a seed. And Joseph didn't have this understanding at 17. You know what? I didn't have that understanding at 17 either. I don't think I had it at 20 or at 30. Okay, didn't have it at 40. It's been something, there are things that we learn as we walk with the Lord. And there's things that we learn actually as we age also. And so we're actually going to talk about where a difference could have been made in his life had a few things been explained. But anyways, right here, he's 17. Think of what you were like when you were 17. That's all I could say. Okay, just think about that for a second. Now let's step into the story. So it actually comes from Genesis. It's chapter 37. We're going to read 5 to 11. So just think about this. Okay, one night, Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Now take note of that. They hated him more than ever, which means there were already problems among the brothers. Okay, this was nothing new. There were already problems. But Joseph just presses ahead anyways, okay? And he says, listen to this dream. We're out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly my bundle stands up and all your bundles gather around and they bow low before mine. Okay, remember, there were already problems between those brothers. They weren't exactly happy with each other. There was already a lot of jealousy there, okay? And his brothers respond, so you think you will be our king, do you? You actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and, just say and, because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. That's very, very important. Okay, some people will hate us because of the dreams we have, because of the call that God has on our life, because we see things that they don't understand. Okay, and the way that we talk about them. Okay, he was responsible for this too. All right, they didn't understand. They didn't connect. There were already problems. And Joseph at 17 didn't understand that some things just need to be kept inside. Some things need to be nurtured as they grow. Or some things only get shared with certain people who will walk beside you and encourage you. He didn't understand that. And apparently he didn't learn his lesson from that dream, because we pick up in verse 9 and it says soon, just say soon he had another dream. And again, he tells his brothers about it. Listen, I've had another dream. And he said, the sun and the moon and the 11 stars bowed down before me. Now, scripture doesn't tell us how the brothers responded, but I think it's safe to assume that they probably responded much the same way they did after the first one, if not even worse. They were not happy. They didn't understand what was going on. They were already jealous of him, so this just added even more fuel. But the difference with this one is that Joseph actually goes and tells his dad, and he shares it with his dad. And his father responded in many ways, much like the brothers did. His father says, will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you? So it went on. Scripture goes on in verse 11. It says, but while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father's name's Jacob wondered what these dreams meant. And that really caught me, because, you know, the family was rocked by Joseph's dreams. I mean, I'm sure Jacob knew the hatred that was brewing among the brothers. And yet, this was a point where Jacob could have sat Joseph down and said, you know what? I don't get this. But I think there's something else going on here. I have to wonder what God's doing. But he didn't do that. He just left Joseph as a 17-year-old full of himself, you know, as most 17-year-olds are, and fueling the envy and the jealousy with his brothers. And he didn't step back and help him learn to process the dream. He didn't step back and say, maybe there's a timing component there with this. He didn't step back and say, you know what, we don't understand the fullness of this. We have to see how this plans out. He didn't step back and say, you know what, God will work this out. So the result of that, of course, is then the jealousy and the family feud that was going on here is that the brothers devise a plan. And Joseph ends up being sold into slavery. You see, as I dreamed with God over the years, I had to learn to contend for the dreams. What dreams do you need to learn to contend with? Just because I knew the dream was from God did not mean that everyone would agree or even think that I was capable of walking that out, of seeing the manifestation of that dream. Some people would come against the dream and others would encourage it, and others would just stay quiet. It's really important. I want you to hear this. There's a big dream I'm contending for right now. I know because I know it's from God. Okay. I know it's going to change a lot of things. And there's small components of that I know I can share publicly. Okay. But there's other aspects of it which I have only shared with a handful of people. Why? Because I know I have to guard it, because I have to protect it, because I can't allow the naysayers in, and I cannot allow the demonic to get a foothold to speak into my own fears and insecurities and the what ifs and ifs onlys, and I don't think this could ever happen, because it's something that can never happen apart from God. And so we have to learn who we share our dreams with and who we don't share our dreams with. Plus, we have to understand that there's often a timing component. There are dreams that are for right now that we need to move forward with, and there's others that are for down the road, like what Joseph was receiving, that needed time to grow and to marinate, and it wasn't the time yet. God still had a leader to develop within Joseph before he could step into that. But in the meantime, in his immaturity and not understanding the timing component and the fullness of God, or the fact that our dreams, we'll have in our head a certain way that they're going to look and the way that they're going to act out, but God may have a different plan. And so he just jumped right into this. He didn't understand. But one thing we need to hear is that God dreams have the capacity to take us into new realms. And that's something that you can say right now. My dreams from God are full of the capacity to take me into new realms. In fact, I would suggest if that dream doesn't shift us into another realm, it's probably not from God. Because God will always pull us outside of our comfort zone, and he will always ask us to do more and imagine more than what we can do on our own, because he wants to be in the equation. So anyways, Joseph's world, it turned upside down. He literally had to leave it all behind against his will, taken into slavery. He's dragged off to Egypt, and in that he had to learn to dream again. Important point here. His world got turned upside down. Think of this, 17-year-old, chained, shackled, being dragged along. Okay, who knows what that slave auction looked like, all right? But that's what this young man had to endure. And in the midst of this, he had to somehow find a way to hang on to the dreams. You see, in times of tragedy and trauma and grief, those are pivotal moments that our dreams can be stolen away. See, he had the dream here, but he's in this transition process. He hadn't seen the manifestation here. There is nothing in this middle ground that looked like those dreams of that 17-year-old young man were going to come to pass. Somehow he had to learn to hang on to those, and somehow he had to learn to dream, or to dream again. We cannot allow the God dreams to be stolen away from us or to be sidelined in those scenes of disappointment, of grief, of trauma, of tragedy. It's very, very important. I want to suggest that in this middle ground, that Joseph found a way to hang on to those dreams and to keep contending for them. You see, hanging on to the dreams and the dream giver, actually, because of the dream giver, because of God's involvement, actually positioned Joseph to walk into a new realm of influence rather than to be held in a cage of slavery. That's really, really important. When we hang on to the dream and the dream giver, that there is the potential that it's more than potential. We can be assured that we will walk into new realms of influence rather than being held in a cage of slavery. The demonic always wants to keep us captive in the cage of slavery, which includes the I can't, it won't happen, I'm not good enough, all the fear components, all the what ifs. That's our cage of slavery. And yet when we hang on to the God dreams, even when we go through those difficult seasons when nothing makes sense, we can be assured that God is at work at a whole different level that we can't see, that we don't understand, but we cannot give up. You see, Joseph's external circumstances were not at all what he dreamed of, but he had no idea. He could not see, even in the moment, he could not see that they would be the stepping stones into that very realm of influence that he saw, that he needed, that he saw in the dreams at the age of 17. But it wasn't the right time, and it's still not the right time. The other thing that happens in all of this is when you think about it, we have a certain way that we think our God dreams should look. And that destiny seldom looks the way we think it will look. And so in order to walk into the new realms, in order to walk into those dreams and the destiny that God has for us, we often have to let go of the familiar and the comfortable. Why? Because we can only walk into new realms if we let go of some of the stuff that we've become comfortable with. Within that, God dreams have the potential to release creative ideas, and that's really important. By nature, I'm not a really highly creative person. However, when I'm dreaming with God, I am dreaming, you are dreaming with the most creative person, okay? With God, the God of the universe, the one who spoke, the one who imagined everything that's around us. That's who we're dreaming with, which means there's the potential for the release of creative ideas. And when we think about that, oh my gosh, that's exciting. That changes so much. And in the middle of all this, think of this. We have this 17-year-old dreamer sold into slavery, in prison. Okay, all this stuff happening, which he didn't sign up for. It didn't look like what he thought it would. But in the middle of all this, he still hasn't seen the fulfillment of those dreams. And yet in the middle, God takes him from being just a dreamer to a dream interpreter. And with this, God showed him or taught him or equipped him to actually hear the dreams from a heavenly perspective. And it's really important that we surround ourselves with people who can hear our God dreams from a heavenly perspective. Now with Joseph, we see evidence of this as he interprets the cupbearers and the baker's dreams. We find that in Genesis 40 if you want to look it up. But it didn't stop there. You see, those dreams, even when he interpreted it, he had a certain outcome in mind, that he was going to get out of jail. He's like, I'm going to interpret these dreams, and I'm going to have, with this is my get out of jail free card. Okay, you're going to get me out. And that didn't happen. It didn't come through. Again, what he had planned wasn't the outcome that he experienced. However, these encounters, they eventually, and just say eventually, this is important, they eventually paved the way into Pharaoh's presence to interpret the dreams of the king. And with that, because God had also began to give him creative ideas. You see, he had this creative download as he interpreted the king's dream. God also gave him the creative download, the creative plan from the very throne room of heaven that would save not just a nation, not just a people group, but nations and people groups, plural. And that's really, really important, because when we step out God's way, it will go far beyond what we can see in the natural. It will go far beyond just us and our little circle. It will go out and out and out and out into even more that we could ask or imagine, because that's who our God is. Now, one of the phrases that I love in the midst of this account is when Pharaoh, when the king is talking to his advisors, and he presents Joseph's plan, okay? He heard this. I don't know if he sent him back to prison, what he did, but anyways, he asks his advisors a key question. He says, can we find anyone else like this man, so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? And that just gets me, because here's this young man, okay, 17 years old, full of himself, sharing these dreams with his family and being ridiculed and being just fueling that hatred and that jealousy, and his father not fathering him, but just also telling him, what are you thinking here? And even though Jacob took those things deep in his heart and pondered them, there's no account. I assume he never fathered Joseph or shared with him how to share these things. So he ends up in slavery, he ends up in chains, and yet somewhere he kept that look, that trust in God. So the dreamer was expanded. His job description was expanded from a dreamer in prison to a dream interpreter. And both of those things, every single thing in the hands of the living God, became a stepping stone, because these dreams that he received at 17 were God-given dreams that there had to be a road walked to see the outcome, to see the fulfillment, to see the manifestation of that dream. And this middle part, there was no way that Joseph could imagine how that would look. And so one of the things, some questions just that we can ask ourselves, am I dreaming with God in such a way that I am so filled with the Spirit of God that I begin to interpret dreams with God? If not, ask the Lord. Ask him to fill us. Ask him to help us to learn to interpret his way from his realm. Because you know what? When people share their dreams with me, I want to partner with the very heartbeat of heaven and encourage them, so that this middle ground that may not look the way they think it should look, I want to be one who encourages them and helps them get to the other side. I don't want to be one that tries to rip that dream away from them. So am I listening to God in such a way that creative ideas are released and lives are saved? Think about Joseph again. As he was listening, he brings down the plan. Even Pharaoh, even this ungodly king, knows that those dreams, that they are from God. And so this catapults Joseph into a position of major, major authority. Okay, why? Because God had a plan far beyond what Joseph could see. I know that God has a plan for my life far beyond what I can see in the moment. I'm going to keep dreaming about it with God and asking for the creative ideas and for the interpretation for the stick-to-itiveness to see it all the way through the transition. How about you? Are you doing that? You know, no matter what my lot in life, remember, Joseph was thrown in prison, and yet he was called to speak to kings. Okay, no matter what my lot in life, do I have the courage to speak to rulers and those in authority? Because you know what? As sons and daughters of the King, you are called. I am called to be able to speak to those in authority, to rulers and kings, those in authority. So if God opens up that door, do not shy back from it, but instead walk through it full of confidence of who you are as a son or daughter of the Most High God. So don't run from it. Even if you walk in the door shaking, don't run from it, but say, okay, I am royalty, so I can do this. I can trust God. Here's another question. Am I holding on to my past and trying to stay in my comfort zone? Or am I stepping into new spheres of influence? What spheres of influence is God opening the door for? I'll tell you, it can be scary to step into it, but there's nothing like it. You kind of sit back and you go, wow, God. Here's another one. Do I realize that my current situation may very well be a stepping stone to the fullness of all that God has for me? You know, dreams matter. And honestly, it might be many, many years before they play out. But the journey and the outcome will look different than what we thought. But you know what? Don't give up on those dreams. You never know where you're going to end up walking. I don't know fully where I'm going to end up walking, but I know that that my life and the dreams God gives me in His hands could be so much more than I could ever ask or imagine. So I can't afford to stop dreaming. You cannot afford to stop dreaming. Do not give up. Do not let anyone or anything stop you from dreaming. Even when it looks impossible, don't stop. Go back, take a look at Joseph. It definitely looked impossible, but God. So keep on dreaming.